All right, we are back. We are here for part 7, chapter 6, The Sunset of Mankind. A queer thing I soon discovered about my little hosts, and that was their lack of interest. They would come to me with eager cries of astonishment, like children, but like children they would soon stop examining me and wander away after some other toy. The dinner and my conversational beginnings ended. I noted for the first time that almost all those who had surrounded me at first were gone. It is odd, too, how speedily I came to disregard these little people. I went out through the portal into the sunlit world again as soon as my hunger was satisfied. I was continually meeting more of these men of the future who would follow me a little distance, chatter and laugh about me, and having smiled and gesticulated in a friendly way, leave me again to my own devices. The calm of evening was upon the world as I emerged from the great hall, and the scene was lit by the warm glow of the setting sun. At first things were very confusing. Everything was so entirely different from the world I had known, even the flowers. The big buildings I had left was situated in the slope of a broad river valley, but the Europeans like to make their rivers not sound like how they spell them. The Thames had shifted, perhaps a mile from its present position. I resolved to mount the summit of the crest, perhaps a mile and a half away, from which I would get a wider view of this, our planet, in the year 802,701 AD. For that, I should explain, was the date the little dials of my machine recorded. As I walked, I was watching for every impression that could possibly help to explain the condition of ruinous splendor in which I found the world, for ruinous it was. Alright, so that is, let's just pause on that for a second. So the Thames, so he's probably in London still, which we know because he didn't move at all, and we assume that since London was the center of that British Empire at the time, that's where you would build a time machine, of course. And then, so, you know, the capital kind of shifted from Rome to Paris, and then upward to London, and this was the height of that power, right? They also misspelled I don't even know how to say it, the Sini, they misspell it. But the year is 802,000. Oh, that's really far into the future. 701. So we're in the year 2025. So that's 802,000. That's really far, if I'm reading this right. But they wrote it out. So see if you can decipher. So for the year was 802,701. So I think 701 years past 802,000. So almost a million years AD, which is Anti-Dominus, after death of Christ, which is before they say current era. That's just the anti-religious historians try to take that historical, actual proven idea out. So we no longer go by the marking of the calendar by that way. We now say current era, but it's aligned anyway. So it doesn't really matter what terminology you use. So our year is 2025, Anti-Dominate, or current era, and he's talking. So when he says AD, that would be our current era. So that would be 800 years into the future from now, right? Plus another 500 years-ish. All right, going on. A little way up he's going on about how he like it looked like the land of perfection, the land of plenty, but now he's starting to notice little cracks in it, right? Like we talked about the Gilded Age, right? Everything was gold, but you know it was only a covering of gold. So now he's starting to notice the little cracks and imperfections. A little way up the hill, for instance, was a great heap of granite, bound together by masses of aluminum, a vast labyrinth of precipitous walls and crumpled heaps, amidst which were thick heaps of very beautiful pagoda-like plants, nettles possibly, but wonderfully tinted with brown about the leaves, and incapable of stinging. It was evidently the derelict remains of some vast structure. To what end built I could not determine. It was here that I was destined at a later date to have a very strange experience, the first intimation of a still stranger discovery. But of all that I will speak in its proper place. Bum, bum, bum. Foreshadowing. or pre-shadowing, because we're traveling in time. Looking round with a sudden thought from the terrace on which I rested for a while, I realized that there were no small houses to be seen. Apparently, the single house and possibly even the household had vanished. Here and there... Oh no, I have to take this. I can't pause. There's no way to do it. Team America. Hello? Yes. 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 Two, 5, 1, 5, 9er. Yep. Still. 25159. Cat 3. Yeah, they're in Sigonella. They're getting rerouted to Oslo, and we have to get them rerouted to Portsmouth. Yeah. But that's also going to be for Q-band. We're going to just use the same one. We have, yeah, the QSSA app that we tried to replace. Yeah, we're going to throw that on there too. Yep. Yeah, why not? Alright, adios, bud. Sorry about that. I will try to figure out how to edit it out, but probably that'll be when I have real internet. Oh, but that I will speak of in its proper place, a little bit of that pre-shadowing. Looking around with a sudden thought, from a terrace on which I rested for a while, I realized that there was no small houses to be seen. Apparently the single house and possibly even the household had vanished. Here and there amongst the greenery were palace-like buildings, but the house and cottage, which formed such a characteristic feature of our own English landscape, had disappeared. Communism, I said to myself. And on the heels of that came another thought. I looked at the half dozen, so let me roll that back right quick. Okay, so back in those days, communism was a rather new idea, and I said it was kind of like the modern American, very American, disdainish type of, it's not communism. He might have said communism, I said to myself, because, I mean, people tried it, and people are still trying it, and it's still in existence. So you can't necessarily allow our interpretation of what this author is saying to taint it, right? So maybe he's exploring it in a positive light. I'm not sure yet either. What do you think about it? Do you know much about it? Communism, I said to myself. And on the heels of that came another thought. I looked at the half-dozen little figures that were following me. Then, in a flash, I perceived that all of them had the same form of costume, the same soft, hairless visage, and the same girlish rotundity of limb. It may seem strange, perhaps, that I had not noticed this before, but everything was so strange. Now I saw the fact plainly enough. In costume, and in all the differences of texture and bearing that now mark off the sexes from each other, these people of the future were alike. And the children seemed, to my eyes, to be but the miniatures of their parents. I judged then that the children of that time were extremely precocious, physically at least, and I found afterwards abundant verification of my opinion. Seeing the ease and security in which these people were living, I felt that this close resemblance of the sexes was, after all, what one would expect. For the strength of a man and the softness of a woman, the institution of the family, and the differentiation of occupations were mere militant necessities of an age of physical force. Where population is balanced and abundant, much childbearing becomes an evil rather than a blessing to the state. Where violence comes but rarely and offspring are secure, there is less necessity, indeed there is no necessity, for an efficient family, and the specialization of sexes with reference to their children's needs disappears. We see some beginnings of this even in our own time, and in this future age it was complete. This, I must remind you, was my speculation at the time. Later I was to appreciate how far it fell short of the reality. Bum bum bum! Foreshadowing. Alright, so he's basically saying like, okay, so in our time, men are manly and women are feminine, right? But he's saying like, but as we progress through the ages, maybe, there's less of that need. Maybe the challenge, maybe the barbarity of our current age and our current dilemma causes men to specialize into being, the hunter and the women into being the gatherer, right? That's that traditional, much rejected in our current modern society, paradigm of how the sexes are. So he's even exploring that aspect of like, what will the future society look like? He's wondering what the future will look like from our past, because he wrote this over 100 years ago, which is pretty cool. While I was musing upon these things, my attention was attracted by a pretty little structure, like a well under a cupola. I thought in a transitory way of the oddness of wells still existing, and then resumed the thread of my speculations. There were no large buildings toward the top of the hill, and as my walking powers were evidently miraculous, I was presently left alone for the first time. With a strange sense of freedom and adventure, I pushed up onto the crest. There I found a seat of some yellow metal I did not recognize, corroded in places with a kind of pinkish rust, and half smothered in soft moss, the armrests cast and filed to the resemblance of griffins' heads. I sat down on it, and I surveyed the broad view of our old world under the sunset of that long day. It was as sweet and fair a view as I have ever seen. The sun had already gone below the horizon, and the west was flaming gold, touched with some horizontal bars of purple and crimson. Below was the valley of the Thames, in which the river lay like a band of burnished steel. I have already spoken of the great palaces dotted about amongst the variegated greenery, some in ruins and some still occupied. Here and there rose a white or silvery figure in the waste garden of the earth, and here and there came a sharp vertical line of some cupola or obelisk. There were no hedges, no signs of propriety rights, no evidences of agriculture. The whole earth had become a garden. So watching, I began to put my interpretation upon the things I had seen. And as it shaped itself to me that evening, my interpretation was something in this way. Afterwards, I found I had got only half the truth, or only a glimpse of one facet of the truth. It seemed to me that I had happened upon humanity upon the wane. The ruddy sunset set me thinking of the sunset of mankind. For the first time, I began to realize an odd consequence of the social effort in which we are at present engaged. And yet, come to think, it is a logical consequence enough. Strength is the outcome of need. Security sets a premium on feebleness. The work of ameliorating the conditions of life, the true civilizing process that makes life more and more secure, had gone steadily on to a climax. One triumph of a united humanity over nature had followed another. Things that are now mere dreams had become projects deliberately put in hand and carried forward. And the harvest was what I saw. After all, the sanitation and the agriculture of today are still in the rudimentary stage. That's back in 1894. The science of our time has attacked but a little department in the field of human disease. But, even so, it spreads its operations very steadily and persistently. Our agriculture and horticulture destroy a weed just here and there, and cultivate perhaps a score or so of wholesome plants, leaving the greater number to fight out the balance as they can. We improve our favorite plants and animals, and how few they are, gradually by selective breeding, now a new and better peach, now a seedless grape, now a sweeter and larger flower, now a more convenient breed of cattle. We improve them gradually because our ideals are vague and tentative, and our knowledge is very limited, because nature, too, is shy and slow in our clumsy hands. Someday, all this will be better organized, and still better. That is the drift of the current in spite of the eddies. The whole world will be intelligent, educated, and cooperating. Things will move faster and faster toward the subjugation of nature. In the end, wisely and carefully, we shall readjust the balance of animal and vegetable life to suit our human needs. We're still doing that. This adjustment, I say, must have been done and done well. Done indeed for all time, in the space of time across which my machine had leapt. The air was free from gnats, the earth from weeds or fungi. Everywhere were fruits and sweet and delightful flowers. Brilliant butterflies flew hither and thither. The ideal of preventative medicine was attained. Diseases had been stamped out. I saw no evidence of any contagious diseases during all my stay. And I shall have to tell you later that even in the process of putrefaction and decay, it had been profoundly affected by these changes. Social triumphs, too, had been affected. I saw mankind housed in splendid shelters, gloriously clothed, and as yet I had found them engaged in no toil. There were no signs of struggle, neither social nor economical struggle. The shop, the advertisement, traffic, all that commerce which constitutes the body of our world was gone. It was natural on that golden evening that I should jump at the idea of a social paradise. The difficulty of increasing population had been met. I guessed, and the population had ceased to increase. But with this changing condition comes inevitably adaptations to that change. What useless biological science is in massive errors is the cause of human intelligence and vigor. Question mark. Hardship and freedom. Conditions under which the active, strong, and subtle survive, and the weaker go to the wall. Conditions that put a premium upon the loyal alliance of capable men, upon self-restraint, patience, and decision, and the institution of the family, and the emotions that arise therein, the fierce jealousy, the tenderness for offspring, parental self-devotion, all found their justification and support in the eminent dangers of the young. Now, where are these eminent dangers? There is a sentiment arising, and it will grow, against connubial jealousy, against fierce maternity, against passion of all sorts, unnecessary things now, and things that make us uncomfortable, savage survivals, discords in a refined and pleasant life. Do we see any of those themes still occurring today? Was the author right about the future, even in our time? What do we see for our future? I thought of the physical slightness of the people, their lack of intelligence, and those big, abundant ruins, and it strengthened my belief in a perfect conquest of nature. For after the battle comes quiet. Humanity had been strong, energetic, and intelligent, and had used all its abundant vitality to alter the conditions under which it lived. And now came the reaction of the altered conditions. Under the new conditions of perfect comfort and security, that restless energy that with us is strength would become weakness. Even in our own time, certain tendencies and desires, once necessary to survival, are a constant source of failure. Physical courage and the love of battle, for instance, are no great help, may even be hindrances to a civilized man. And in a state of physical balance and security, power, intellectual as well as physical, would be out of place. For countless years I judged there had been no danger of war or solitary violence, no danger from wild beasts, no wasting disease to require strength of constitution, no need of toil. For such a life, what we should call the weak are well equipped as the strong, and are indeed no longer weak. Better equipped indeed they are, for the strong would be fretted out by an energy for which there was no outlet. No doubt the exquisite beauty of the buildings I saw was the outcome of the last surgings of the now purposeless energy of mankind before it settled down into perfect harmony with the conditions under which it lived. The flourish of that triumph, which had been the last great peace. This has ever been the fate of energy and security. It takes to art and to eroticism, and then comes out languor and decay. Even this article, impetus, would at last die away. Had almost died in the last time I saw it. To adorn themselves with flowers, to dance, to sing in the sunlight. So much was left of the artistic spirit, and no more. Even that would fade into the end into a contented inactivity. We are kept keen on the grindstone of pain and necessity, and it seems to me that here was the hateful grindstone broken at last. As soon as I sat there gathering in the dark, I thought of that in this world. A simple explanation. I had mastered the problems of the world, mastered the whole secret of these delicious people. Possibly, the checks that they had devised for the increase in population had succeeded too well, and their numbers had rather diminished than kept stationary. Is that happening in any first world countries, for instance, in our current time? That would account for the abandoned ruins. Very simple was my explanation, and plausible enough. As most wrong theories are. Bum bum bum! Okay, so he goes and he explains all these things from the 18th century perspective, that we see those same themes going on in our modern times. It's amazing how, being a thinking person, like you are, listening to me, right? How you can take someone from 1894 and look at their ideas and they're still valid. You can even take someone from 2000 BC probably and sit them in the room with us and sit them in that cocktail lounge with the time traveler and Phil B, the only guy with a name, and the medical man, and they would have a great intellectual conversation about some of the same stuff. And what's great about that is that he goes on this whole sitting in the ruins of some previous era. Behind him is just this paradise world to live in with no challenges or anything like that. And he's like, yeah, this is my theory. And then so as he's pondering this in the future, right, he's telling the story in the cocktail lounge back in 1894, and he says, but my theory was wrong. Alright, so let's find out what happens next. That's kind of a little foreshadowing, like maybe something is going to be a little bit different next chapter. Let's find out. And I managed to make this 20 minutes long, so it'll be quite a bit of an update time, probably about 2 days until I can get the next one posted.